both. Let's bring in Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts. He's a Marine Corps veteran. He commanded infantry in Afghanistan. He's now a major in the reserves. He supports President Biden's decision to pull all U.S. forces out of Afghanistan. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. It's good to have you on the show. I want to get your reaction to that little clip we heard from President Biden telling George Stephanopoulos that the chaos that we have seen was baked into his decision, that he always knew it was going to be chaotic. He always knew that things were going to be bad. Do you agree?
Thanks for having me on, Jake. When this president took office, he faced a wrenching decision. He could go big or go home. He could double down and ramp up the U.S. military presence by an order of magnitude to enter a third decade of conflict in a failed counterinsurgency, or he could make the high-integrity decision to withdraw the forces. Now, withdrawal from a country whose moniker is the graveyard of empires was never going to be smooth sailing. And we're seeing that in real time now. But more importantly, we are seeing the U.S. military and this administration adapt to the fluid situation and resume both commercial and military evacuations as they've stabilized the airport.
So you agree that it was going to be chaotic. You can't just withdraw from Afghanistan and have there not be some chaos.
I think that we have focused a lot on the Taliban horsepower and the speed of their advance, but have not focused on the Afghan willpower. A 300,000 person army with a decent air force collapsed in a matter of days. And that type of morale breaking is an indication of a complete lack of leadership from Afghan central government.
Well, you know that the argument from people who disagree with how this was done, not necessarily people who think that we should continue to have a presence there, is that the U.S. provided logistical support. The U.S. provided, especially through contractors, technical support for the Air Force. And then when you have Trump saying that troops need to come out, Biden saying troops need to come out, and all that support coming out, it's not a surprise that the Afghan military would crumble as it did.
The fact that after 20 years and $80 billion plus, the Afghan military was incapable of fighting for more than a week on its own two legs is really indicative of the fact that there was no political endgame for the counterinsurgency. And that's why this president's decision to withdraw was so critical. I also just really want to underscore the critical point here, which is that this president's choice was not between status quo, between the contractors and logisticians that you're referring to, or withdrawal. This president's decision was, do we ramp up the American military footprint and engage in full-scale combat with the Taliban for yet another decade? Because if he had decided to stay past President Trump's agreement, the Taliban would have launched their fighting season again, and we'd be back in firefights.
It wasn't that long ago when you, Congressman, were leading combat patrols against the Taliban in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. Now CNN has witnessed the Taliban dispersing crowds with gunfire. There have been reports of violent clashes with protesters in other parts of the country. Earlier in our show, Clarissa Ward showed some video of her being accosted, told to cover her face. Taliban fighters threatening to pistol whip her producer, a CNN producer. How long do you think the Taliban is going to even allow the U.S. to continue this airport operation without kinetic engagement with the U.S., without shots being fired?
The Taliban are inheriting a different country than they left 20 years ago. The literacy rate in Afghanistan has doubled. The infant mortality rate has halved. Access to electricity has tripled or quadrupled. There are 10 times as many kids in school as there were 20 years ago, 40% of whom are girls. The Taliban are inheriting a country in which real progress has been made. And my fervent hope is that they're going to adapt to some of that substantive progress rather than force the country to adapt to their violent extremist norms.
Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss, thank you so much. And, of course, thank you for your service, sir.
Semper Fi.